Alright, Brother Wilson, is there an easier way to do this video? Because I've done it about 3 times, and I'm really stressing out here. Because we both know I've got trait anxiety. And the last couple rounds, it's become a little debilitating. But I'm going to try to push through, and we're going to get through this. And I hope you're patient, because I tend to ramble, especially when I get nervous. And especially when my self-efficacy is down, which it is right now, because I'm a little overwhelmed. A lot of anxiety going on. And I know that anxiety is not good, and it's not the kind of anxiety that I want to bring into the physical climate of my lesson with Charity on Saturday morning. Because I know she maybe already have some state anxiety herself, because it's not going to be a traditional physical arrangement such as a classroom. It's going to be here in my apartment, and so I have to already be cognizant of that. And I know that if my anxiety is not in check, that means that I am, for myself, I'm personally struggling with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so if I don't have that in order, it's going to create a lot of interference and distractions for my lesson with Charity. And so those are some things that I know I got to be careful of. And I also know that I've got to be careful with not having contagious behaviors, like being stressed out, nervous, or if I'm tired from all my other finals, that could also affect our lesson. Sorry. I have about 80 or so terms here that I tried to organize for this video prior, but I don't know how well it's going to go. But something I want to do to help with my lesson, because it is discussion based and it could easily get a little boring or lack energy or momentum, I want to use the mnemonic device of chunking, and I want to space it out, break it up, whether that's like with a personal anecdote or simply some questions to get to know Charity's self-concept of herself, which could help me understand where her self-esteem is at, and also maybe what her personal theory is of beauty. But we'll get to that a little bit later. So I wanted to do beauty, as difficult and abstract of a topic or subject as it is. I wanted to do beauty because I feel like it's a lesson that could fit in with the theory of Charity's zone of proximal development, which we both know is by Watsky. Sorry if I butcher the name. But I believe that this discussion, this lesson, will be within Charity's ZPD because of where she's at with Erickson's theory of psychosocial stages of development, as well as Piaget. When it comes to Erikson, he says that Charity's age, she should be she may start to have issues with her identity and perhaps her self-esteem And the emphasis of beauty in today's society could really affect that. And so helping her to have a firm foundation of self, as well as reviewing things that she may already know. I hope to be able to raise her self-efficacy and being able to see herself more positively, or continue to see herself positively, and to see others positively. Because I realized that, and I remember that at her age, comparing myself to others was a big thing. At least for me it was. Not every person's the same though. But when it comes to Piaget's cognitive development, he says that charities should be able to start engaging in formal operational reasoning. She'll be able to understand maybe more abstract concepts, which this topic definitely is. But he also kind of backs up what Erickson's theory says by the fact that she may become more self-conscious, or even idealistic, or even critical in her judgment. But on a good note, it says that her self-regulation can go up. And so I believe that the challenges that I'll give her will be able to help her grow. But what I really gotta be careful of is creating misconceptions, overgeneralizations, and some undergeneralizations, which she may already have, because I feel like a lot of people don't think about beauty as deeply as I've started to think about it and learn about it. But maybe that's true, maybe that's not. Maybe I myself have a misconception of that. But and one undergeneralization, for example, could be that she may have or that she may know of, is that only beautiful images are only things that make us happy or joyful, or are inspiring and empowering, which I totally advocate those sorts of images. I believe they're great, but I have the personal opinion or personal theory or baby theory that even ugly images in and of themselves can be relatively beautiful, even if they're visually not appealing, if that makes sense. But we'll get to that later too, I think. So, get myself in order here. One thing that I'm really struggling with is the defining characteristics of this lesson and of beauty, because it is so abstract, and really those defining characteristics are based on individual philosophies, and there are many philosophies about beauty that are out there, about art in general. So I may need some help with that, and I need to think about that a little bit more, because I'm a little stressed out about that, because I don't want to give her misconceptions, because I already have given her some misconceptions, like I did in my pre-assessment. So moving on to that, in my pre-assessment with Charity, before the lesson, I was wanting examples of what she thought was beautiful and ugly in terms of art. And for some reason, she took the idea of beauty and ugly to refer to a more social aspect and a more gospel-based aspect, which I loved her responses, but they didn't really answer what I had actually asked her. I don't know if I wasn't clear enough, or exactly what was going on, but since I know that the social aspect of it is on her mind, I want to be able to use that to my advantage with the dilemmas that I want to present her with in our discussion. But one thing I want to make sure of is that in my lesson, I don't just focus on the social. I do want to incorporate the fact that art in and of itself, beauty within art is more complex, and give me a moment. All right, I am back. All right, so one thing I want to talk about here is that I wanted to use expository instruction, but the problem is that I'm not really an expert. I am learning about this subject in my other classes. I myself am a student. And so I don't I know that my personal theory may not be completely there, and I may be using that totally wrong, but and I probably have an illusion of knowing what I'm talking about. So that's interesting. But what I am excited about for this lesson is that it really is going to go into Kohlberg's stages of moral development, and not only Kohlberg, but also what is her name? I can think of it. Carol Gilligan. Their stages of moral development. So, based off of the little that I know about Charity, I would say that according to Kohlberg, she is still in the conventional stage, about I would say a 3 or 4 in her cognitive development. Her pre-assessment showed a possible level 3 of the good boy/good girl mentality, because she was giving kind of standard church views. It wasn't really her thoughts or her views. It was kind of very cut and dry. So I don't know if what she said is completely part of her self-concept or her personal theory just yet, or if it's based off of what she's heard. But I can't truly identify that for a fact of where she's at yet. I'm going to have to ask more questions, more pre-assessment questions while I'm in there with her. But according to Gilligan, or Carol, let's go with Carol. Her theory was more based for females. And so according to her, charity should be entering into the state of transition between selfishness to responsibility to others, as well as knowing that self-sacrifice is goodness, and perhaps even into the higher transition from goodness to truth, that she is a person too. I'll be honest, I don't exactly understand what that means specifically, but my hope is that, and what I seems like, is that Charity does kind of get the idea that good things are beautiful, and that it seems like she does have a good idea of like her higher purpose, morally. But what I want to figure out is if, in fact, her personal theory is due to intuition, or if it merely just comes from the mentality of the good girl mentality in her moral development. So, a couple of things that I wanted to mention before I forget them is that within this lesson, I really don't want to use extrinsic motivation. I don't really want to have an incentive to encourage Charity to just like give me her opinions, or to just give me thoughts. So I feel like it's not the most effective in this case. I would rather it be more intrinsic, have more intrinsic merit to it. I also want to be careful that I don't do too much direct instruction about beauty, because it could make her bored and uninterested, and it definitely probably wouldn't pique her situational interest. And so instead, I wanted to do more of a discovery learning method, and I also wanted by us actively looking at images together, because I think that visualization will spark her memories and spark things in her brain. And I know there is a specific brain function or area that deals with that. So some of those, as I was studying up for this, some of the areas of the brain that I realized are going to be used a lot in this lesson is her limbic system, because that in and of itself is going to draw upon her emotions, and it'll maybe helps stimulate memories or responses and thoughts. But because this is going to be a visual lesson, more so visual and auditory, it'll be using we'll be using the occipital lobe, because that deals with a lot of the visual processing in the brain. But I also have to be aware that the temporal lobe, because it's a discussion based, we will be dealing a lot with the temporal lobe, because that is auditory, as well as the thalamus, because as it goes along and as we discuss things. The thalamus will be important because it keeps her awake, and I really want her to stay awake. And right now, I also have to be cognizant of the fact that her sensory register is going to be really crazy, probably, because it is such a new environment, and the things that we're going to look at or talk about is going to be sending a lot of information through her brain. So let's get to the lesson, shall we? I'm sorry that this is so long. Alright, I'm back. So, with Charity's lesson, I want to be able to implement my own personal theory of beauty, but I have to be careful because that could create some hot cognition later down the road in the lesson, by sharing my experiences and such. And I have to be ready for that, and I'm still debating on what things I want to share and what things I may not share. But I think that by sharing my personal theory with Charity, perhaps in my advertisement video, I might be able to pique some situational interest. But for the lesson itself, I am thinking about what kind of conditioning or shaping I'm going to use. I want Charity to bring an example of what she thinks is beautiful, an image that she thinks is beautiful, and I myself want to be able to bring what I think is beautiful as well as ugly, and I hope I can remember to ask her to do that here soon. And that in and of itself will be more of a classical conditioning, but an operant conditioning, it sounds more like the process, to me it sounded like more of the process of extrinsic motivation methods for oneself. So I guess it kind of plays into self-regulation, and I think with that it'll more come from some of the goals I want to give her towards the end of the lesson, kind of the takeaways, I think. But moving on, let's talk about Jerome Bruner, because his constructivist theory about the way that students and individuals construct new ideas and concepts, which is also known as discovery learning, based off of their current and past knowledge, is going to be important, I think, when it comes to discussing what me and Charity will be discussing. So I guess getting into the meat of things, what I want to do with Charity is I want to give her a hands-on approach of helping her experience and make conclusions on her own about the nature of beauty and what her own definition is. And to help her have more of a discovery learning experience, I want to encourage and push her to share opinions of what she thinks of beauty and why she has the opinions that she has, because I think that'll help me understand where she's at a little bit more with Kohlberg's stages of moral development. So, one of the dilemmas that I want to give her is I want to bring up an old photo from me in high school that has a bunch of girls from my choir, because the dilemma that I want to give her is a judgment dilemma, of having to choose or rank which girls she thinks are most beautiful to least. And it might be difficult for her because what I'm expecting is that she doesn't think that way. And I am not saying and promoting that I want her to judge and be critical of girls. That's not what I mean. That's not what I intend. But I do want her to be a little bit uncomfortable, because sometimes we subconsciously start to compare ourselves with other girls. And so I just want to use that as an introductory of, because she doesn't know those girls in the photo, and so I want to use that as a jumping off point for our discussion of getting into what beauty is, or getting into what defines beauty, what she defines as beauty, and what I might define as beauty. And then as we progress through the lesson, I want to try to give her another dilemma that's maybe a little more personal for her, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. So because I know the dilemma that I'm giving her, I want to be able to do a prototype for her, because Albert Bandera, he has a theory that people can learn from one another through observation, imitating, and especially modeling. So I do want to model for her, just kind of an example, just so that maybe she doesn't feel quite as put on the spot. And so that's kind of one of my hopes, is to do that. So, according to Bloom's taxonomy, he's got a theory of what he calls three domains of development, such as the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor domains. And in relation to the cognitive domain for Charity, I'm hoping that by talking about the elements of design, Charity's ability to organize and see connections in a photo will help her make a deeper thought process between what is ugly and what is beautiful. So that's something I didn't mention before, is that I do want to take a small portion of the time to maybe talk about some of the basic design principles that can be found in some simple photographs that I've taken. I think I want to kind of open up with that before I get into all the social stuff, because I do want to touch on the fact, again, I do want to remind and touch on the fact that beauty isn't just a social thing. It is related to the visual arts, and it is very important to that. And the way we see visual arts is important to how we see social aspects. So I was going to talk about the psychomotor domain, and I'm drawing a blank, and I can't really remember right now. So I'm just going to move on and do the best I can with what I have. Alright, so attribution theory. I know that one pretty well, at least I feel like I do. And to tap into this concept during my lesson, I want to later present Charity with another dilemma that's a little more personal, like I mentioned before. And so I want to ask Charity about her own view of her own personal beauty, and I want to ask her why she's beautiful, or what she thinks makes her beautiful. I want to ask her those questions because I think I can draw out of her what her own attribution theory might be. Some possible examples of this could be, or responses could be, genetics, which is external, and I want to say it's unstable because she can't control it, but I could be wrong in how I'm using that. Another example is that she takes care of herself, which that would be an internal attribution. Or another external would be, like she kind of mentioned in her pre-assessment, or referred to, is that God made her that way, and with God we are all beautiful, and we should see each other that way. I know this is going to sound kind of random, and I realize that because it's a little past the fact, but earlier I got a little wrapped up talking about my own anxiety that I didn't really talk about Charity's anxieties. So with Charity's anxieties, I did mention that I do want to promote a little bit of state anxiety with the dilemmas that I'm giving her, because I feel like it, within our discussion, what I plan to talk about, I think it'll help her grow. But I know I have to be careful because I don't know if Charity already has trait anxiety, such as myself. I don't know this, and I am hoping that as I get to know her a little better, that I'll be able to understand or pick up on this more so. And because I want to produce a little bit of state anxiety through the dilemma, I know that would be facilitating anxiety. But again, I know I gotta be careful with that because in doing so, I could create some hot cognition within our discussion, and that could lead her to having debilitating anxiety. And something that I'm realizing for myself is when I enter into debilitating anxiety, that's when I really start to experience learned helplessness. And I tend to want to give up, and I tend to kind of tune out, and I know that's not a good thing because that will affect, that really will affect a lot of the memory systems for Charity and myself. So like I said, I've got to be really careful with Charity's memory systems, especially with her. If I have too much hot cognition, or if there's supposed to be a lull, or if her hierarchy of needs, according to Maslow, are not met, then her working short-term memory may not be able to process everything that that we talk about, that I say, what she says, and I also have to be careful because that can cause extinction, and I feel like if I hammer over head with the same point over and over, kind of like I'm doing in this video, it's going to get boring, and she's not going to care as much anymore. As much as I want to be careful of how much repetitive I am, and I don't want to create too much hot cognition, because if I create a lot of hot cognition, the hippocampus could be affected, and that could probably lead to a failure to retrieve information, or even a failure to store information in her long-term memory, or for her to even have experienced mastery learning. I feel like some repetition has to happen though, because in order for myelination to take place, because I really want her to understand that just as the ugly that she sees in people, or the beautiful that she sees in people. I want her to be able to transfer that to art in general, whether it be paintings or what we're going to be talking about is just like other photographs, maybe even nature pictures or the various photographs that we may discuss and view together and analyze together in our lesson. And I want that myelination to take place so that this does take root in her long-term memory. That's my hope anyway. So a couple of things that I just wanted to go over real quick before I forgot. I know I've said that before, but in terms of testing, I'm not really testing. After trying to learn more about normal versus criterion testing, I didn't really feel like my lesson fits either of those tests. But that doesn't mean I don't want to do some sort of assessment with her, or post-assessment. But I'm still kind of planning that as well. So I'm sorry that that's not in this video. But one way that I want to assess, or I guess for me as I was thinking about this, is to use reinforcement, which I believe I will probably do through verbal cueing of my own experiences, or maybe my own personal fable of beauty and ugliness. Now, I mentioned reinforcement, and I'm still kind of shaky on that term, I know. But one thing I do know is that I probably won't be using intermittent reinforcement. That's something that I kind of know for sure. So you know what? I know this lesson plan video is probably not that great, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that it doesn't become my self-fulfilling prophecy of this lesson. Because right now I'm trying to think of these terms that some of them I've never heard of, most of them I've never heard of, and I'm still learning how to use them. There's some that I feel like I'm super green in my understanding, and then there's a plethora of them that I don't know. But here's what I do know. I know that from my lesson that I hope to encourage intrinsic motivation in Charity to seek beauty in all her visual surroundings in her world. I hope to encourage this behavior in Charity so that she can see her own beauty for what it is, and to seek the perspective of gospel beauty more deeply, as she seems to be doing. But I hope she continues to do that. Another thing I know is that I want to avoid memory decay. I don't just want this to be a lesson that fades in the back of her memory because it's something she may have already heard before. I'm hoping that she'll gain a new perspective, and that it will be lasting, and that it will, that her personal theory and her self-concept and everything else about her will be able to, her self-efficacy will raise. I hope that she is benefited by this lesson. I also know that Charity may have her own idea or schema of what she really thinks about beauty and ugliness. I think it will be interesting to see if she'll make room for accommodation based on our discussion of beauty. And I'm interested to see what she really thinks about the idea that beautiful things can be ugly, I wonder if she will agree or disagree. I really do. I'm really interested to see what she says. I'm interested in the accommodation that Charity might have or may not have, because I believe that this lesson has potential to affect the plasticity of Charity's brain and of her memory. Because I know that the brain can rewire itself. That's something I know. And I know that the more we stretch our minds, the more that we can create new circuitry and the more that our cognitive development can grow. And that's something that I hope to do with Charity. That's probably one of the biggest things I hope for her, is that she gains a new perspective, whether she agrees or disagrees. I'm hoping that she will open up her mind to thinking about it in a new light. One last thing that I want to mention is regarding mirror neurons, because I could have talked about this concept in several different places throughout this video, especially when I was talking about contagious behaviors, like if I'm yawning or something like that. I know that mirror neurons can play a factor in that. But I also know that mirror neurons can play a factor in hot cognition, especially with the experience that I wanted to share with her. And so I know I've got to be cognizant of that factor, because mirror neurons, they can be a good thing and they can be a bad thing. And I know this is no way to end the video with that random last concept that I've got for you. And I hope that I use some of these concepts right. After doing this video, where's my self-efficacy? It's about the same place. But maybe tomorrow I'll feel better. And I think the more that I prepare for this lesson, maybe the better I will feel. I'm sorry that I've waited so long to get these posted and get these done. I was planning on doing it last week, but that doesn't really matter. So this is my video, and I'm sorry it's so long, and I'm sorry I'm such a slow talker and that I babble, but that's me. So here it is, and I hope Charity's excited. Alright, bye.